Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Pleiades Visiting Writer Series. You're in for a treat as we have two really incredible poets and translators who traveled to be with us today. First, I'm just going to make a couple of announcements. We're recording this reading, so please, and as always, go ahead and turn off your cell phones or silence your cell phones. Our next Visiting Writers event will be November 9th at 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. in Hendricks Hall, and that will be the author of Children of the New World, our One Campus, One Book selection. That's Alexander Weinstein, so stay tuned for that. We're on Facebook, so follow and like us, the Pleiades Visiting Writer Series on Facebook, and stay up to date with our events. There's also a link to the Facebook page on the English department website. Thank you to the UCM English Department, the Center for Teaching and Learning, and the Missouri Arts Council for supporting this reading today. So we'll listen to our poets read, and then at the end, there will be time for some questions, so be thinking about what you'd like to ask our visiting writers. Also, the bookstore is here with books for sale, so afterwards, buy a book and have our writers sign them for you. We're really fortunate to have an amazing working poet and translator with us today, and that's Rebecca Gale Howell. Native to Kentucky, Rebecca Gale Howell is the James Still Writer-in-Residence at the Hindman Settlement School. She is the author of Render, an Apocalypse, which was a finalist for Forward's Book of the Year and the Weatherford Award for Appalachian Literature. And she is the translator of Amal al-Jabari's verse memoir of the Iraq War, Hajar Before the Occupation, After the Occupation, which was selected as the best book of poetry by the Library Journal and was a finalist for 3%'s Best Translated Book Award. Among Howell's honors are fellowships from the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, the Carson McCullers Center, and the Kentucky Arts Council, as well as a Pushcart Prize. She holds a PhD from Texas Tech University, where she specialized in Southern literature from a global perspective, and an MFA in poetry and translation from Drew University. Since 2014, she has been poetry editor for the Oxford American. Howell's latest book, American Purgatory, was selected by Don Scher for the Sexton Prize. London's Eyewear Publishing released the book to both the United Kingdom and the United States in early 2017. Please join me in welcoming Rebecca Gale Howell.
It's such a privilege to be here, and I want to thank Jenny and all of you for not only inviting me, but inviting David and running this series in this community. The students I had lunch with today are so, I keep using the word ready, just so smart and so curious and so driven to know, and I trust that many of you are exactly that. I really feel like it's a privilege to be here, so thank you. I think that some of you have read Render, so I thought I would read from it. And what you need to know is that it's a story, sort of a hidden story, and the story has two main characters that you need to know about. The first one is a guy who wakes up in a family farm, in a subsistence farm, and he doesn't know how to survive there. He's forgotten, like most of us, how to survive in an agrarian place. And the second one is the narrator, and she's kind of a trickster narrator. Sometimes she's giving him advice that will help him, and sometimes she's giving him advice that will require him to learn the hard way. And I think that's more or less what you need to know. So I'm going to start with the preface poem, and then I'll read a series of the poems that tell the story. Do you not work? Does your sweat not fall like bread from the firmament of your brow? Your thirst and hunger mounting, your stomach gorged, your coulter, your hand winding worm roads into soil, have you not been cursed? Brother who is not the keeping brother, tiller of earth, are you not a mouth that eats the mites of day called dust,
that filth wind to which you will return. And do you not call it banquet, styrofoam angels all around? Do you not call it feast? You want what you want. You cannot help that, anyhow, now. That's so magical. How to wake. Learn your lesson from the calf. Look how he rams his head into the cow's sack when she does not drop. When she holds her drink like a warm secret, let her know your thirst is there, a wide-mouthed bucket on the ground. If you want first milk, first light, sweet cream, first chore done, be mean. Shout her name. Force her leg back, her tail swatting you, your fist pounding her, your face strained against the spate of flies, her hot dirt body, horns rising, open bone eroded by air and age. Do not be ashamed of this, your private pleasure. Take charge. Tell her your secrets, your lips low against her udder like you are dream twitching. And who is there to see you? No one, no one. Watch yourself. You'll get shit on or kicked in the head. First time I milked a cow, I got both of those things. How to kill a rooster. Because he spurred you, grab him by his neck and his legs. Hold him in both your hands. Look him in the eye. Let him ask if you are to kill him today. Then tell him yes. Say yes with your own eye just before you take him to the clothesline and tie him up by his yellow feet. Take a blade. Cut his throat. Watch his blood drip to the ground. Watch his wings spread and flap and flap. And while you watch this desperate bird and think to yourself, I will never be like him. Remember, in the end, you will drop him in boiling water. Pluck each of his oily feathers between your fingers. Remember, in the end, you will taste him for good. How to kill a hen. Come on, that's a little funny. Enter the night coop whistling. Through your teeth, sing. In this awful world of sorrow, sing. In this wicked path of sin, tuck her under your arm and walk away from the laying birds, the cuckold morning rising in their dumb wings. Walk away from sleep. Make sure her hollow bones alone will be warmed by it, your wordless bellows breast, for this is your gift to her. Tell her you never think of tomorrow. Tell her for what you'd lose in the end. Enter the night coop whistling. Leave whistling. Climb the dust hill. When you get up to the house, ring once the orbit of your failing over your head, a breaking neck. For this is your gift to her. You can hear your Savior calling, bare-faced and feather-red. Do you all know what the offal is? O-F-F-A-L. Oh, this is on. I should be leaning this way. What's the offal? Yeah.
The yes.
Mm-hmm. You want to be more specific than that?
You got the yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the parts we don't like. A catalog of what you have. The awful, the slop, swill, pitiless river, the beak, the bone. Newspaper pink with sinews oil piled up on the kitchen floor, cumulus and close. The air of drippings, the wet air of fat. How, when the animal opens, the naming begins. Kept, not kept. And how, when the animal empties, a sugar sets in. A pressure, barometric, and all that's left will be rendered by it, made small and smaller by it, until what is there to name but the lie and the burning clean. A catalog of what you do not have. Enough. So, as you can probably tell, the book is works like a farmer's almanac. It's a series of instructions, and as I said, it's a series of instructions to this fellow who's forgotten how to survive in our most native place. But it's also a book that is a very thinly veiled meditation on how we treat each other, right? Well, when you're thinking about these things, a very low-lying fruit for metaphor is hogs. So there are a lot of poems in here that deal with pigs. So let's go to class on pig rearing for a minute. What do we know about pigs? Why would that be low-lying fruit for metaphor? Anyone know anything about pigs? No one's going to say it's a filthy animal?
They're smart as a 3-year-old child.
Yeah, they're really smart. Can you say more about that?
I don't know.
My dog is probably, I'm sorry to my sweetheart, but probably my dog is my most important creature to me. And pigs are generally smarter than my dog. They can use mirrors to get what they want. They're also very emotional. Do we know this? They have a wild and advanced emotional life. Anything else we know?
They eat everything.
Yeah, they're omnivores. They're selective omnivores like we are. So if you give a pig a choice between, say, cauliflower and mango, she's going to pick the mango every time because it's more delicious, right? I've stopped saying this in public, but to you I will say it. This is also why, of all animals in the kingdom, their meat is closest to human meat than any other. Yeah, sorry. It's true, though. Sorry, but it's true. Anything else? They're actually very clean. So we'll start there. How to be civilized. Because she once ran forest and field, but came to you when called, loyal beast. Because her hooves are formed for soil, fallen leaves, long rains, for earth that gives way beneath foot, and weight and foraging, because she did come, but might go astray. We now keep the pin, keep control. Build it tall with walls, build it deep with indoor, outdoor space. Make the pig think she has a choice. She can defecate away from her feed. She can still be clean. Build a wood floor angled high so you can wash out her shit and piss if you have the time. So you can come to her and take each leg up, each hoof, and scrub, or else she'll swell. Her feet sore from splinters and inert days, and she'll lie down, her muscles atrophied, her meat in ruin, and you will have to quit whatever it is you are doing and take a stick and prod her. Take your boot and kick her. Get up, if you have the time. Build a pen tall with walls. She will adapt. This is how we are civilized. How to build trust. See how she rakes against the fence, the other pigs, her straw, how she's tried. She really has. And what a simple thing for you to stop stacking hay, hosing away her filth. Stop what? Maybe to smoke. Your hands already out of your pockets, your teeth already clenched. What a simple thing. Her head wrenching toward light, your fingers thick with her wire hair as you think about the work ahead, its musk and hazard, how this is not about love as she comes to you, her whole muzzle inside your coat, her breath probing your chest, how she roots you. The yellow sky smoldering, how she asks for more. How to be a man. Don't miss. Shoot her square. If you squeal her, you can't shoot again. There are rules. You'll be made to chase her, and she will run in black dawn air, cold and clean, and you will run, and you will hear her screaming, the other hogs screaming, the other men jeering at you less than them. And you'll be made to catch her, but you won't. And you'll be made to take her 400, 600-pound body to the ground, pin her, bleed her throat, but you won't. The black dawn air, cold and mean, the wet fog, your breath, or is it hers? How to be a pig. Be clever. Be quick to learn. Dream in color, dream in technicolor trees. Sleep, forage between gold leaves. Squeeze out 20 young a year. Make them fight for your teats. Dream that one is flame-tipped black spots. Dream that he gets the teat he wants. See red while you let the flies land. Throw tantrums. Stop throwing tantrums. Pavlov says all pigs are hysterical. All pigs are hysterical, Pavlov says. You know, he actually said that. He tried the dog experiment on pigs, and they were having none of it. That did not make him happy. How to be an animal. Forget you are an animal. Forget ancient rummaging. Pigs wild in their snouts. Forget you ran with them. Wild among trees. Wild in your cheer. How to kill a hog. Do you remember how close you were to her when she was farrowing and she needed you? Her bawling drawing you out of bed, a bad dream. How you washed her vulva, soft, warm water over your own hands. How you scrubbed even your fingernails under your fingernails before you came to the pen, and the sunflower oil you coated yourself in so she would not chafe even as she hemorrhaged, and how against all this bloody shit and hay you took each piglet out of her night and into yours, into your palm, and cleared its mouth, its nose of mucus, how you brought breath to each set of tiny lungs, how you washed, how you opened her. This is how to touch her now. Once she is hung and cut, straight cut from rectum to neck, while the other men take their cigarettes, find quick coffee, food, lag behind, wait until the barn is empty, until you are alone. Then step inside her, your arms inside her death like it is a room, your private room, peculiar and clean. Gather her organs up into your arms like you once did your mother's robes when you were a boy who knew nothing but the scent of sweat and silk. Hold her and inhale before reaching all the way around to snip the last tendon, before you cut the stomach, intestines, kidney, liver, before you cut her heart out and she drops into you and drops down into the cold wash tub of this day. Close your eyes just once. Just once. Do not turn away. So I'll close with this last poem that has become a kind of ars poetica for me. How to preserve. Does anyone can food in here? Anyone's family? Yeah, you do? Yeah. David's like, nope. Good for you. How to preserve. Boil the water bath. Drop glass, drop hands, fingertips, speaking mouth, tongue. Drop memory like glass down into the bath. Bring up the heat slow so none notice. Nothing shatters so the tongue can think it might not be burned. Might go on telling what does not want to be told. This is how you preserve. Sterilize. Scald before packing the jars with glory. O harvest, hard won and terrible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It is my great pleasure to introduce David Keplinger. David Keplinger is the author of 4 collections of poetry, most recently Another City, The Most Natural Thing, and The Prayers of Others, which won the Colorado Book Award. His first collection, The Rose Inside, was chosen by poet Mary Oliver for the 1999 T.S. Eliot Prize. David has received fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, and a 2-year Soros Foundation fellowship in the Czech Republic. In 2011, he produced By and By, an album of 11 songs based on the poetry of his great-great-grandfather, a Civil War veteran. His translations of Danish poet Carsten René Nielsen have appeared in 2 volumes, World Cut Out with Crooked Scissors and House Inspections, a Lannan translation selection. A collaboration with German poet Jan Wagner has just been released from Milkweed. The other day, right? Just the other day. Today is really special for me because David was my first real teacher of poetry. And it was with him I learned that poetry has the ability to unfold worlds you never knew existed. I'll never forget hours spent in his office, him leaning forward saying, "Listen," then reading me a poem that left me ringing for the rest of the day. Yesterday in my poetry class, David talked about the fact that he writes a lot about the anatomical body. Sometimes I think when we remember that we live inside our own bodies, we learn to experience the world in a visceral way that living inside the mind doesn't always allow us. As we look inward, we learn through empathy new ways of seeing what lies outside of the body. Language is one of these things. It is of the body, and because we live inside language, we are able to translate the world through the lens of ourselves. In this way, poetry, like the body, is the conduit for transcendence. In one of my favorite poems of David's from his book, The Most Natural Thing, he writes, "A part of me could crawl up out of me, forget myself, and sing." David Keplinger's poems do just this. They rise out of the place of the body and language and sing to us. Let us listen.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Jenny, for that introduction. That was lovely. And Rebecca, thank you for your poems. Your reading was stunning. And that last line, harvest hard won and terrible, resonates with me as I think about what we're doing here. What is poetry for? What is it a response to? What does it initiate in us? What does it birth in us? And the idea of having to kill in order to exist, which you're investigating in your poems, is an important one to me too. In a way, language kills in order to make something else. Language has to name something yet unnamed in order to get back to the source of the thing, in order to get to the heart of the thing. But it's got to categorize and narrow in a way before it gets there. It's the problem of poetry. But when I hear your poems, I think about something that Joseph Campbell said like 40 years ago about the origins of myth. And he claimed that the origins of myth in part came from guilt that we had to kill in order to live. And even if you're talking about plants and vegetables, you're talking about killing in order to stay alive. And the response on cave walls, or the response in stories, and the response in narratives and sitting by the fire, was that there was always a revenant that came back. There was always this returning animal that gave willingly of its life in order for you to live. And then there are spiritual examples of that too. And it's something that really interests me. So I loved your poems as a response to that. We were at lunch and we were talking about our favorite poets, and it just so happens that Rebecca and I have a favorite poet in common, so I wanted to start this reading with a reading from Wendell Berry, and I'm doing what my students do now, so I'm reading this on my phone, but this is such a great poem I can't resist. It's called Come Forth. I dreamed of my father when he was old. We went to see some horses in a field. They were sorrels, as red almost as blood, the light gold on their shoulders and haunches. Though they came to us all a-tremble with curiosity and snorty with caution, they had never known bridle or harness. My father walked among them admiring, for he was a knower of horses, and these were fine. He leaned on a cane and dragged his feet along the ground in hurried little steps, so that I called to him to take care, as the horses stamped and frolicked around him. But while I warned, he seized the mane of the nearest one. It'll be all right, he said. And then from his broken stance, he leapt astride and sat lithe and straight and strong in the sun's unshadowed excellence. It's such a moving poem to me. And it's one of those poems that stands for many, 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 many others, that is able to translate an emotion so powerfully and in such a quick burst that you know that it's metaphorical for life experiences that you've yet to find words to explain their significance. This idea of coming forth, this command to come forth. Every poet wants that of their work. We write 100 poems and maybe we get a half a come forth poem. We write 1,000 poems and maybe we get 1 or 2 come forth poems in our lives. But I'll tell you, when you get one of those, it's worth it. I'll start by reading some poems from a new book that's coming out this spring. It's called Another City. This is a ghazal, and it's called The Brahms. For those of you who know the ghazal form, it's a form that was used by Rumi, it was used by Ghalib, it was used by a lot of the great Eastern poets, and it involves repetition of the last word in each couplet. And each couplet actually is a little poem unto itself. If you think of a couplet in a ghazal, it's almost like its own haiku. And then all of them are strung together in order to make a whole poem. But it's got this repetition that is like the refrain of a song, too. So they all have to be woven together by that repetition. And then in the last couplet, the most fun part of the ghazal is that you've got to name yourself somehow. And there are all kinds of creative ways that this is done. Natasha Trethewey has a really awesome one in Native Guard. So this is called The Brahms. And it's after the words of Leon Fleischer, a concert pianist who suffered for 40 years from focal dystonia in his right hand. It was like his right hand was stone, and then he was cured of the disease late in his career. The Brahms. Those years I thought of little but the Brahms. The left hand grew bored. Play Brahms, I told the right. But the hand hit the keys like a fist. The Brahms would travel from my brain along the right of my shoulder and then from triceps into bone, where it would die or almost die. All right, let me say it hung like a fish, stunned, the Brahms, suspended, not dead. Then my constant urge to write the thing or force it down my arm. To play the Brahms, my teacher scolded. You have to listen. And he was right. First to listen to the quarter notes as they began like breaths. First to hear the language of my right. Brahms, play. Play the fingers of the hands. Brahms, make me your instrument. Your left hand, your right. This is called beatification. And it's got an epigraph from Antigone. And yet I honored thee as the wise will deem rightly. The only soul who beatifies itself is the lightning bug of North America, also called firefly, also called half in love with dusty death, also called slant of light, also known as hobo who believes he's Jesus. And you, O my soul, greased with luciferase, my consort, arriving on fire as lampyridae, your flash dactylic like apple tree, crucifix, undertow. You are the one lit from inside. As you venerate your life to children, and I chased you a long time through darkness, my hands thrust forward, when I slammed shut my fist like a cave door and squeezed. As Jenny noted, I was blessed to be chosen by Mary Oliver for a prize that got my first book published. And, you know, just to get your book published is a big deal. But imagine it was close to New Year's Day, 1999, when this small publisher in Missouri, by the way, called me and said, well, your book has won this prize. And I thought, oh my God, that's amazing. And then they said, and Mary Oliver has chosen it. And I said, it's also incredible that a poet with the same name as Mary Oliver chose my prize, because I didn't imagine that first she would know that I existed, and second, that she would choose my book. But it was actually Mary Oliver who chose the book. And I was so thankful that I wrote her a letter and expressed my gratitude. And Mary wrote me back. And I began this correspondence with her that ended with me going to visit her often wherever she happened to live. And for those of you who don't know Mary Oliver's work, she is a stunningly good poet of nature who makes nature pertinent and urgent in a way that most, poets who sit back and admire nature and write about tree bark don't happen to do. Mary makes it seem like this tree bark that we're hearing about is everything in life that we have to know and learn about. She's able to just, with laser focus, pinpoint the essence of the thing and then bring it out in description. something I always admired about her. And when I would stay with her in Provincetown in Massachusetts, I would find these sticky notes all around her house. So like on the stairwell going up to the second floor, there would be a little sticky note, and it would say something like, "This world had to exist, but it didn't have to be beautiful." So these are like notes to herself, that she writes in the morning. And so it's just amazing to be in her midst. And anyway, I wrote this poem. I don't have any other poems about her, but I did write this poem, which is a letter to her. It's called Letter to Oliver from Rock Creek. Because I can't say what that clicking sound is outside my window, the green of Rock Creek spread below me, and because you can't say what that clicking sound is, somewhere tucked in bed, your neck and chin concealed by the bark of a burnt sienna scarf. As I imagine you, I think of the dozens of times we lay in your blankets reading the Hopkins, the Bring My Roots Rain, or anything by Keats, whose flowers drowned him. Or the rebellious instructions about happiness, while the clicking I hear continues, the smallest insect on record, small enough to be a gnat's pilot, small like a certain quality you have courted in your poems, how they squint and bend down to things without disturbing their place, and how this characteristic expands in my mind exponentially as the objects we spoke of grow smaller, the closed hood of the mushroom's umbrella at night, or the clam, pharaonic, locked in its tomb, eternal, which made a nice supper. How all of it relates to us, sister, even the touch of the knee of some creature against its other knee, to make a click, which I can hear across some intangible distance, while the source, so obviously out there, goes on refusing to be named. As Jenny said, I just completed a project with a German poet named Jan Wagner, who won a big prize. He won a prize called the Büchner Prize, and it's Germany's second most important literary prize for all genres. And so he's really riding high now. I'm going to keep adjusting this until it listens to me. But at lunch, we were talking about how in the act of translation, you and the person that you're translating have this conversation that goes to what Steven Pinker calls the language of thought. It goes all the way down to a place before language. What he calls the language of thought is the language out of which our language is then translated, and then speech translates that. So you're having this conversation with somebody, and you're getting inside their poems, and you're moving around in there, and you have this honorary passport in the country of their poetry. And then you come back out, and you begin to write your own, and you can't help but speak your own with a little accent. You know what I mean? So I had this book, and he and I had been working together since 2009, and it was all by email. We were pen pals, and we never spoke, not on the phone, nothing. It was just emails back and forth. My dear Jan, my dear David, I bid you farewell. I mean, it was like the 19th century, from sunny Washington, D.C., and it was wonderful. We had a great time doing this, and never met until this summer. But in 2013, my most recent book came out. It's called The Most Natural Thing. And this was the cover that they designed for it, which I was happy with. It's this blue book with a tree on the front and then the roots underneath. And this image comes from the last poem in the book, which I'll read for you in a minute. And then my publisher, my now publisher, Milkweed, designed this book with Jan that just came out. It arrived on October 1st. And I was so excited to see it, and then I opened the box, and here is this book. It's a blue book with a a leaf on the front, but the two look like kind of similar, right? I'm not saying that this is some eerie, synchronicity, but it's also kind of not an accident. It's a translation out of the language of thought, that there's something about my poetry that gave the designer this idea, and there's something about his poetry that gave the designer this idea. And I'm so privileged to have done this work with him, because you'll hear in a minute how wonderful his poems are. But it's a beautiful thing to experience what I'm talking about. If you ever have the chance to do a literary translation, as we were speaking about, Kate and I were speaking about this, that the chance to live in somebody else's poetry for a brief stint will teach you so much about your own work, about your own choices, about why you prefer this to that in your poetry. And also just in your everyday speech, what language is to you, what Charles Simic calls your attitude towards language. What is your attitude toward the language? Is it a playground or is it a minefield? And people do have these different ideas about language. We just think that everybody thinks about it the way we do, but they actually don't. Each of us comes to language with a different attitude. And this is your chance to discover it. So if you don't mind, I would just like to read a couple of these poems so you get to hear his work. There are a few favorites that I wanted to share with you. This is called Bed Sheets. Bed sheets. Grandfather was embalmed in his and carried out, and once, a year later, when I was making that bed, I discovered him again, shriveled to a wasp, minuscule pharaoh of a bygone summer. We folded sheets this way, the arms made wide until your mirror self would bring the tight stretched surface across. A linen foxtrot followed, and step after step of increasingly smaller rectangles, each vanishing till your noses almost touched. Everything could be hidden in their snowy interior. An empty flagon with a haunting of perfume, a few lavender blossoms or field flowers, a dime, or now and again a litter of mothballs in its nest. For now, however, they rested, mute and white in their cabinets, whole piles of them, pickled in fragrance, mangled, ironed, starched, and carefully packed like parachutes before a jump from unforeseen heights. And one more. This is should I read that one now? I won't read that one. It's a funny one, though. This is a sonnet, and it's called Rhino. Come closer. His eyes are too dull, depicting nothing besides shadows, the glitter of grass and heat, and the horn. He tramples after it like sleepers follow the finger of the hypnotist. Not a cloud is gliding over the plain while he drinks, travels to the next mud hole, hiding himself in indifference, impermeable skin. His heft of pure gray lugs through black ages, the millions of forgetful years, alone with this one bird, the buffagus, which balances onto the square of his back like a single piece of Sèvres china, a demi-tasse cup, fragile, precarious. So anyway, this is a collection that has just come out from Milkweed. I was so happy to be a part of it. I also do translations from the Danish, and once again, I do consider myself a literary translator, but my work is in collaboration with the author himself. So the Danish poetry is translated by a man named Carsten René Nielsen, the poet, and given to me, and then I take that literal translation and I try to turn it into something that sounds like effortless English. And I have a lot of conversations with the writer. Like with Jan, I have conversations about, what's more important? Is it the fact that this rhymes, or is it your literal meaning, or is it the voice that's supposed to emerge from the poem? And then he'll tell me his preferences, and I'll try to pull that off in the poem. And it turns out that poet to poet, it differs. Like for this writer, it was really important that the rhymes and the meter stayed true to the original. So I had to move a lot of things around in order to make that happen. But for Nielsen, the Danish poet, he could care less about any of that. What he really cared about was the voice of the material, the way that the sentences kind of unfolded in a certain way, and the personality, which was kind of like a wink in the work. It was supposed to be funny in English, so I had to translate funny, which is extremely difficult. It's much easier to translate sonnets than it is to translate something that's comical in one language into another. But and comical in a way that is more like surrealism. It's not funny, ha ha. It's funny, like, wow, that's weird. So here's just one example of Nielsen to give you a sense. This is a brand new poem, and we worked on it this summer. It's called Vacuum. Everything has its origin in dying stars. Mercury and aluminum, pencils and tuning forks, even iron monkeys and hovering roses. Everything is stardust with added gravitation. And all was made of dust in his living room, a television, a sofa, a table of dust. While fish of dust dissolved in his aquarium, I cleaned the apartment, and when I turned off the vacuum, I could hear him singing from inside it. A sea shanty, I think it was. In the empty apartment, it sounded so clearly as if everything in the world was about to begin all over again. So I'll just read one more poem from this new collection. And it's the final poem in the book. To return to the themes brought out by Wendell Berry. This is called Magic. You used the term magic as you stepped up to the podium, so. Magic. In the padlocked trunk before they dropped him in the river, Houdini was said to foresee his mother's death. Stuck in his box at the end of a chain, he felt the death, its approach, her worry growing smaller at the eyes as she removed herself from herself, her body shrunken to the size of a keyhole. I believe that grief can travel distances like that. My mother's cough would wake me up at night 200 miles away. That was a year ago, before she got too small. She drowned in a cloud of bright white baby hair. She lay on the bed as if on a board, the last I saw her, still and calm. Then truly, as if a lever were pulled, she tipped backwards, out of view. Thanks, everyone.